A house is made of wood and stone, but only love can make a home. Welcome to the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, helping you make your home into one you'll love even more. On News Radio Wood 1300 and 106.9 FM.
Well, Happy New Year, Dan.
And Happy New Year.
No. I can't say Happy New Year to you first. I mean, I have to address the audience.
Yes.
So Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah.
Except Dan. Happy New Year, Dan.
Happy New Year to you, Dan, and everybody.
Yeah, I'm not off to a great start this year. I'm already ambling along.
Is 2021 going to be like this?
Yeah, I'm at end of 2020 level, quality. Oh, well, at least 2020's the past.
It's in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, let's just hope 2021.
I'm not going to hope. I'm going to plan.
Let's plan that it's brighter. Do you have big New Year's resolutions that you make?
No, we're not a resolution type of family.
Why not?
I don't know. I think that it's just setting yourself up for possible failure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've always proclaimed that I was going to lose weight, but now that I think about it, yeah, maybe I am setting myself up for failure. I can't think of any success.
Right. See? Maybe it's not good to look back like that. I'm not so sure it's a good idea.
Maybe I am so exactly where I should be that there really is nothing to fix.
I would think that's a possibility.
That's what I'm going to work with. I have achieved what all mankind strives for.
Right.
Anyway, What do we got on the show today?
Oh, we're going to talk about a bunch of different things.
A bunch of different things. Do you really know what we're talking about?
I'm not really sure, no.
You're hedging, aren't you? You're relying on me.
Tell me, Dan, what are we going to talk about today?
All right. At the end of the show, we're going to be playing an old segment.
Okay.
That Betsy and I recorded. Yeah, about woodworking mistakes.
Okay.
That we made. And how to avoid them.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good one.
Personal experience.
It's a fun one. That's why we're replaying it.
Okay.
We're also going to be talking about painting in the winter. There's a number of issues that you'll want to be aware of, whether it's inside or outside.
Right.
Yes, you still can do some exterior work. We'll explain all of that coming up. We're also going to be talking about condensation on windows. If you've got water trickling down the windows.
Right. If you can't see out and you don't, it's too foggy.
Right. If it sounds like the little waterfall, those little sound maker things in your home, and you like the sounds, but maybe know that it's causing problems, we're going to help you deal with that.
Oh, yeah.
But right now, let's talk about batteries. This is something you wanted to deal with.
Right. This is the time of year, a lot of times we give gifts that involve having to have batteries.
Yes. And sometimes we forget to get those batteries.
Oh, yes. That's almost every time.
And then
we're scrounging around through the drawers in the kitchen trying to find a couple of batteries just
emptying
to see if this thing works.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I haven't used this device in a while. I'll just take the batteries out of this. Right. So there's several different things we can talk about batteries. We're going to kind of do a big flyover and then talk about a couple little specific things.
All right.
There's different kinds of batteries, first of all. There's lead acid batteries. That's the kind of battery that's in your car. We're not going to really talk about that today. We can talk about that some other time.
Okay.
Another type that we all know and use and have around our house is the alkaline battery.
Not to be confused with the Tiger Hero alkaline.
That's right. Right. Yes.
This is all mushed together. Alkaline.
Right. Now you got me thinking. So
sorry.
So the other couple types that are rechargeable types are nickel cadmium NiCad batteries. And that's kind of an old technology. And then what's replaced that is the lithium ion type batteries.
All right.
So NiCad, we don't see those anymore. And the reason why is because they had a problem with memory, which is if you would discharge the battery halfway, let's say, and now plug it back in to charge it back up, now it kills the total capacity of that battery and makes it so now it only carries half as much as it was used to when it was new.
I think we've all heard those horror stories. But that's not the case with the newer stuff.
Lithium-ion batteries solve those problems. You don't have to discharge them all the way before you charge them back up. They don't have a memory. Also, they can
feel their pain.
Right. Not having a memory, what a great thing,
Yes, maybe that's not so bad. 2020? What?
Right. I don't remember that. So besides the fact that they don't have a memory, they also hold their charge longer when they're just sitting in a drawer.
All right.
So that tool that's just sitting in a drawer, it's not going to be dead when you pick it up to use it.
All right.
So that's rechargeables, and that's kind of cool. But really, what I want to talk about is the batteries that we replace in the remotes and stuff like that.
Right.
And the alkaline batteries. And so there's two different main types. One is the cylindrical type, like a AA battery, and the other is the little rectangular 9-volt batteries. Mm-hmm. And here's the cool thing that I want to talk about this.
All right, I'm ready.
Is how can you tell if these batteries are dead if you don't have a battery tester?
Okay.
Do you know?
Well, I know the 9-volt one because I stumbled on that by accident.
Oh, by accident?
Yeah.
I want to hear this.
If I smell things, I push them right against my nose.
And then you tell the other people, smell this.
And they're always grossed out. I don't know why I do that. But I also lick a lot of stuff. I don't know why.
You've never gotten out of the toddler stage.
And I guess I shouldn't say that's a current problem. But when I was littler, I remember I remember putting my tongue on the prongs of the battery, and there's
it's a
this
little
weird
scary
little flavor.
Yeah, right. A little tanginess.
It means it's good.
Yeah, right. That tells you it's working.
If it's not, if you don't get anything, that one's dead.
That's right.
How do you do the little ones?
Well, this is really pretty cool. You can just hold them upright and maybe say a couple inches above a hard surface like a table and drop it on the table. If it bounces, that means it's dead. If it doesn't bounce, that means it's charged.
So if it's got a little bit of a dead weight to it,
if it just kind of clunks on the tabletop,
that one's ready to go.
That's a good battery still.
All right.
And if it bounces, then you know it's dead.
Yeah, because I could never get my tongue to cover both of the prongs.
Yeah, you have to put it all the way in your mouth.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you've probably tried.
Anyway, those are interesting little things. If you're trying to test your batteries, now you know.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about condensation on windows and what you can do to stop it.
Okay.
That's all next. Stay tuned.
Helping you turn your house into your dream home. This is the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show, presented by Benjamin Moore on News Radio Wood 1300 and 106.9 FM.
Well, Dan, one of the problems that people deal with in the home this time of year is condensation on the windows.
Yeah.
Do you get that at your house?
Oh, yeah.
Bad?
Sometimes. Yeah. It depends on the temperature outside.
Yeah. So if you've got that, it's something that a lot of us deal with. But a couple of things. First off, a little bit isn't a big deal.
Right.
You can kind of roll with it.
It's kind of normal.
Right. If you've got a lot of it, you might want to deal with it. And one other thing that I thought was very interesting, and it's important to point out, because years back when I moved into my house, my first house, I had this, and instantly, of course, my tendency is to go to the doomsday option.
I need
all the
a new
time.
house.
No, well, yeah. Well, I guess there is another option further than where I normally go. When I see things like this, I assume that in this instance, my windows are all shot.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to replace everything.
Thousands and thousands of dollars.
Then I Google how much that's going to cost me.
Yeah.
And then I don't sleep for a week.
Right.
Well, anyway, if you've got this doesn't necessarily mean your windows need to be replaced.
No.
So that's the good news. Even if you've got significant amounts of this, it doesn't mean the windows are bad.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're not.
It could be either way, but it's very likely that they're not bad.
Right. And we're going to walk you through that. And we've got some ways that you can go about potentially reducing this, if not completely stopping it.
That's right.
Now, I shared with you when we were kind of going around with ideas that we wanted to talk about on the show, and I pitched this idea, and I thought it was hilarious because I ran into an article by a home inspector. And he was writing about this, and he gets to go around to all these houses, of course. And he has seen some incredible solutions to this.
Very innovative.
Extremely innovative and creative. They use duct tape. lots of plastic pieces. He's actually seen people create little gutters that are like pressed against the glass, and then it channels into a little tube and then into a bucket. Yeah. We've got better solutions than that.
Yeah, that sounds like they've got a pretty severe problem if they're doing that.
Or they're engineers. Or they want to be engineers.
They're bored.
Yeah. Anyway, if you've got the problem, I guess quickly we might as well explain why it happens.
Sure. Why it happens is because of the temperature differential between the outside and the inside of the house. When it's cold outside, the window is cold. It's much colder than the walls and all the stuff inside the house. And of course, there's moisture in the air. And it wants to collect on cold surfaces.
Right. So that's where it comes from. The moisture ends up in the air because basically everyday living throws tons of moisture into the air.
Right.
Cooking, boiling water, of course, you're throwing lots of moisture into the air. Showering.
Yeah. Breathing,
sweating.
Right. And a lot of times we have a humidifier either built into our furnace or a separate device that's intentionally putting moisture into the air because in the wintertime, otherwise, I'd give you a little touch and you'll feel a snap.
You're right. Static electricity thing. And Dan, you haven't yet experienced a winter in our studio, but let me just give you the short scoop here. It gets really dry.
We don't have a humidifier
Well,
here.
we do now because every time I would hop off of my chair is raised, so I have to jump into it and jump out of it. And I guess whenever that motion happens, I become almost like a superhero.
It's
with
generating
my electrical power. Yeah. But it always backfires and hurts a lot. So
it's not fun.
So if you do have that humidifier running, that's honestly, that's the first thing you can.
The easiest thing.
Right. To possibly reduce the amount of humidity in the air.
Yeah.
Is maybe put a little less in.
Right. Yeah, that's an obvious first step.
So check that out. That's the first thing. Another thing you can do is to make sure that you're always running. Well, not always, but running the exhaust fan above the stove when you're cooking.
Right.
It gets really annoying if you run it all the time. So I'm not recommending that. But when you're cooking, run that and the bathroom fans when you're showering.
Right. And afterwards.
For how long?
Until the mirror clears up. That's always been my kind of gauge of when it's dry enough in the room.
Yeah. See, we don't do that. That's one of our big failings.
You shut it off right away when you get out of the shower?
Yes.
Right.
And so it leaves all that moisture in there.
Right.
So make sure you're using those things. And let's spend a little time on these exhaust fans because there are a number of interesting little things to consider when we're talking about them.
Right.
And first off, when we're talking bathroom exhaust fans, you've got to make sure you've got a big enough one.
Right. The right size for the space that you're exhausting from.
Right. The ceiling fans come with CFM ratings.
Cubic feet per minute.
Feet per minute. And that's how you determine what size you need.
Right.
And there are complicated mathematical formulations to get there.
I'm not good at math. Don't make me do math.
We're not going to do that on the radio.
Good.
The good news is there are a couple of simple ones. If you've got a bathroom that's under 50 square foot, under 50,
of the floor area.
Right. Under 50 square foot, you need a 50 CFM fan.
Oh, that's easy math.
Really, really easy.
I can do that math.
Yep. The next one, if it's 50 to 100 square foot.
Let me guess. 100 CFM.
No, it's a CFM per square foot. So if you've got an 80 square foot bathroom, you need an 80 CFM fan.
Okay, still easy math for me.
If it's over 100 square foot, that's when the math gets a little more crazy. And we'll put some links in the show notes so you can figure that out.
Okay, good.
And the easy ones all take into a consideration that your ceiling is 8 foot.
Okay.
If you've got a bigger ceiling, you're transferring into the more complicated math zone.
All right, now it's time to get out the calculator.
Yeah. So the bottom line is make sure you've got a big enough fan for the space. And if you pop that faceplate off, there should be a sticker inside that has
tells
a number of some information about the fan itself,
right?
Technical stuff, but you'll see the CFM rating.
And another thing is when you have that faceplate off, it's a great time to look at the vanes of that fan because the efficiency of those fans goes way down when they get dirty, dusty.
Don't look at it with your mouth open. That's how I look at a lot of things.
Don't pull that thing down with your mouth open. Wear a pair of goggles.
Here's a great reason to have a mask on. Even if your mouth is open, it'll bounce off. But they really can collect Trust me, I know.
Right. It's really quite gross. I mean,
and it reduces the efficiency of it
a lot, and it makes them noisier.
And they're a little more dangerous. We had the fire marshal in the studio probably a year ago or so, and he talked about a fire that they ran into because the lint in there
really built up so much that it caused a fire. Wow.
Yeah, so it's probably not a terribly common thing.
Right, but it's still something. It happened once at least.
Yeah, so make sure it's clean. Make sure you've got a big enough fan. And one last thing with those is make sure they're vented outside.
Right.
I know that code is, of course, that they are.
Yeah.
But older houses didn't necessarily
do that. Mine, for example, did not.
Right, neither did mine. My home inspector found it. Right after he laughed at the trough that we glued to the window to get rid of the condensation, he pointed out how all the bathroom fans were venting into the attic.
Right.
Very last thing you want to, well, not the very last thing, but one of the last things you want to do in your home is to be pumping lots of moist air into an enclosed space like that. You can deal with all kinds of issues down the road.
You can look at mold as a potential problem. The other thing is if your insulation in your attic becomes moist, it loses a lot of its efficiency.
Right. So bathroom fans and the range exhaust should also be vented outside.
Right.
So dig into those things. Other things you can do. The old windows can be dramatically improved just by putting in storm windows.
Right.
Adding that extra layer. Or
maybe
plastic.
This plastic film that you put on the inside of the window.
Have you ever done that?
Yes, I have, and it's worked really good.
All right. So that will help reduce the condensation, and it also will warm up the space a little bit.
Yeah.
That's its entire purpose.
Right.
Is to do those things. So those will work. Another thing you could try is if you've got a crawl space that's bare earth.
Oh, that probably transmits a lot of moisture.
Yeah. So you've got to get that sealed up with a vapor barrier.
A piece of plastic sheeting?
Heavy plastic, as few seams as possible.
Right.
Get that down. And along those same lines, gutters and downspouts. You wouldn't think about that, but if the moisture is getting into the basement, it's going to work its way through the home. That's just how it works.
So make sure they're directed far enough away from the foundation.
Right. Make sure the gutters are clean. Make sure the downspouts exhaust probably about 4 to 6 feet away from the foundation.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure the grade of the home, around the home slopes away from the house.
Yeah.
All of those things will help.
You sure wouldn't think that, your downspouts have something to do with the amount of condensation on your windows, but it might.
Right. The vapor pressure will push that moisture in the air through brick, mortar, plaster, wood, and it can end up wherever. It's going to find the easiest place, and that's going to be, the cold windows, like you said, and it's going to dump it right there.
Right.
So, yeah, taking care of that. And it solves other problems anyway. Nobody wants the moist, damp basement thing.
Right.
And I was blown away. I had this problem in my old house where we would get water in if it rained really, really hard. And the very first thing I tried was I thought it was just, kind of a not going to work, not really worth it, but it's worth trying. I'll put up better gutter system and jet it a little further away from the house.
And
I solved 90% of the problem.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was just coming too close to the house and it found easy access that way. So make sure you take care of that. I ended up, unfortunately, jetting it into my neighbor's yard.
So now they have problems.
Had a problem. And then we had to find that butter zone where we were both happy. Anyway, those are some things. If none of those work, it's possible. It's time to replace the windows. And one thing we should mention before we wrap this up, because you can have the moisture on the inside of the glass, which is what we've been talking about.
Like where you wipe your hand on it and it gets wet.
And you can touch it. Right. But you could have double pane or whatever windows.
The thermal pane windows.
Right, and it could be in between.
Inside there.
And no matter how much you wipe it, all you do is smear the glass with your little grubby fingerprints.
So what's the solution to that?
Well, that's when you cry a little more.
Because now you're looking at replacing at least the glass part of the window.
Right, exactly that. The seal is broken at that point.
Yeah.
You're seeing moisture in there. The good news is that you can generally, most of the time, replace just one of those panes.
Right.
Where the problem is. They can come out and take care of that.
So it's not like replacing an entire window.
No, and it looks like the cost is about 25% of the cost of a full window.
Okay, yeah, so that's not so bad.
Anyway, if you're dealing with condensation on the windows and you're whipping out the duct tape and some plastic trough so that you can jet it to a bucket somewhere, there are other solutions.
Yeah, let's not get drastic right now.
Try these, and if that doesn't work, go ahead with what you've got and send us some photos because we'd love to see it.
Yes, I would definitely love to see that.
All right, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about some of the things you'll run into when you're painting in the winter.
Okay.
And we've got some tips to make sure it's as smooth a process as possible.
Yeah, let's talk about that next.
All right, that's next. Stay tuned.
If you want to take your DIY skills up a rung, the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show is here to give you a boost on News Radio Wood 1300 and 106.9 FM.
And we're back, and we're going to talk about painting in the winter.
Okay.
Sounds like a Christmas song, doesn't it? From a really bad album.
Yeah, the one that I've not heard and I don't want to.
We should write something.
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
You're not a singer?
I'm not a musician. I'm not a singer.
Right.
And the subject matter does not interest me as far as putting it to a tune goes.
All right. Well, we'll just shelve that for now. We'll just agree that maybe.
Okay, someday we'll return to that idea.
And painting in the winter might be a hit song. So let's talk about the process itself, though, because we've run into this in the stores where contractors, everybody, sometimes struggles. Right. And inside they struggle when they're painting in the winter. But the surprise is there's some outdoor stuff that you could also be doing.
Sure. Yeah. And, a lot of times people get caught by the end of the season, like, oh, I just need that one little thing I need to do yet.
There are people that have that one last little thing to do. I've got like that one notebook left that I need to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes there are exterior projects. We'll touch on that a little bit, but mostly interior things are what we're talking about here. But as far as exterior goes, a couple things to keep in mind is modern paints tend to work better at lower temperatures than things that were available, 10, 15 years ago. And we can paint in lower temperatures outdoors now, but you have to be a little more careful. There are a lot of days where you don't want to do it. Obviously, if it's wet, raining, whatever, it's not a good painting day.
Or recently has rained, or is going to rain.
Right. One advantage, though, is that snow, unlike rain, doesn't absorb into surfaces, so it doesn't take as long for things to dry out in the winter, surprisingly.
All right.
But, some exterior painting can be done.
Now, latex or oil? It's a mix.
Either, but the latex paints, you have to make sure if you read the label carefully or talk to the person at the store to see if it is low temperature compatible.
Right, and the low temperature compatible is referring to surface temperatures.
Right, surface and air temperatures.
Right. But we've had plenty of instances where the air temperature reaches a certain point.
Right.
But the surface is still way too cold.
And that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we talk about exterior painting in the winter is that amount of time in the day is much shorter than it normally would be in the summer. Besides the fact that the day itself there's less daylight, there's just a shorter window of time where the temperature is warm enough to make this work.
So bottom line, if you've got a project that you're not sure of, but you'd love to still wrap it up, and it's an
exterior project,
stop out at the stores.
Yeah, ask a couple questions, and we can lead you in the right direction.
Right. So interior stuff, though, that's where it's a little bit interesting, too, because we run into some complications with application when you're working in the wintertime.
Yeah. And now, first of all, I want to say that, wintertime could be considered one of the best times to do these kind of projects.
Right.
Because you're indoors so much, and what a better time could there be to refresh the space that you're looking at so much while you're indoors all the time. Makes a lot of sense that way. But yes, there are some things to consider as far as painting interior in the winter. And the main one is humidity, the amount of moisture in the air. Low humidity, which is what we see in the wintertime, means paint's going to dry faster.
Right. It's pulling that water out quicker and
that's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it allows you to recoat faster, so you can get 2 coats on sooner,
really fast.
But the downside is it could dry so quickly that you have problems with lap marks and things like that. So you have to work pretty quickly when you work in a low humidity interior environment in the wintertime.
Right. And there are other things that you can do too. I mean, one of the things is getting the blowers off.
Yes.
And stuff like that with the furnace, because that just speeds everything along exponentially.
Right. And in fact, that goes to another point. Sometimes you might have a project where you're finishing bare wood indoors in the wintertime.
Like you've got your trim or something, you're putting a varnish over top of that.
A floor, a piece of furniture, something like that. Well, wood, of course, it's porous. It has all these pores in it, and those pores have air in them. As the temperature is rising, the air in those pores of the wood is expanding. So in that situation, if we would coat that with let's say a varnish, we're going to get bubbles because that air is expanding and it needs to come out, and it's going to kind of ruin our finish. So what we would normally recommend is turn the furnace off, so that the temperature is falling during that initial drying period of the coating, so that we don't have a problem with bubbles.
So how do you work around an oil-based varnish? In the winter, you're working in your house, you've got a gas furnace. Go, Dan. What do you do? What do you do in that scenario?
Well, so first of all, the concentration of fumes, it can be annoying from a standpoint of the smell. That's probably the most, obvious thing.
I can tell you maybe that's where you're going. But for me, I will never, ever forget it because I was in so much trouble. We have a gas dryer as well. And I did a little bit of this. And then my wife did, I don't know how many loads of laundry, and everything smelled like kerosene.
Oh, really?
Burned the fumes all into the clothes.
Oh, I'd never thought of that. But yes, I can see. It's
not a good decision.
Right.
It was really bad.
So, people worry about their pilot light, their furnace or their hot water heater or something like that. The fumes that come off from coatings, from solvent-based coatings as they dry, are heavier than air, so they'll settle to the ground. And yes, if you're doing a lot of painting in your basement with oil-based paint, you really need to turn off the pilot lights. If you're doing a little bit and you're in the living room or on the second floor or whatever the situation is, you're not going to have to worry about it. The fumes will be so diluted that there's no way that they will cause a danger for, combustion, burning, catching fire, blowing up your house.
Ventilate.
Yeah, and the smell too. If you're using oil-based paint in the wintertime, it doesn't hurt to throw a couple windows open.
Right. So what other things should we be thinking about?
Well,
cracking open that can in the crisp winter. We could maybe use that line in our song. just thinking.
You're still thinking about it. You are, aren't you? You're not going to give up on it.
Latch onto something.
So here's something that it's not a do-it-yourselfer thing, but I still want to throw it out there, which is the wintertime is a great time to hire a contractor. They're not as busy. They have time and you might save some money. They might be looking for work. So wintertime is a great time to hire a contractor to do a project like that in your house.
Right. A lot of them are looking for stuff to do. The whole coronavirus thing hasn't helped either.
Right.
And yet they've adjusted their processes. Of course, ask and make sure that everybody feels good about the situation. But they've all adjusted. They're working as safely as possible. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to get somebody when sometimes you're looking at, we've had times where you're a year out.
Right. So another thing to keep in mind is, again, like we talked about with exterior, the days are shorter. A lot of times it's hard to see what we're doing when we're working in low light situations. It's a great idea to get some sort of auxiliary lighting in the room to help you see roller skips or thick spots or whatever. It's really good to get some extra light in the wintertime into the indoor spaces.
That's probably a good idea anytime, but definitely in the wintertime, you'll be surprised how much you'll see.
Right. It might save you a lot of time.
Exactly. Now, one other thing this time of year that we want to mention is just freezing paint. People working and leaving it in the garage.
Yeah, that's
problematic.
Right. It is not necessarily a good idea. Latex paint can freeze. So let's prevent that from happening. But in the off chance that it was not preventable and the paint is frozen, that doesn't necessarily mean it's junk. Some paints can recover from a frozen state. There's a way to tell.
Okay, and please tell, Dan. How do we tell?
Okay, when you open the can up,
is it stench related?
Well, no, that would be a different thing.
Okay.
That's microbial contamination. That's a bug.
That's a fun one.
Yeah. No, this is when you open the can up and stir it well. If it's smooth, it's good. Even if it has been frozen before, after it's thawed out, if you stir it up, it's smooth, it's still good. If it's cottage cheese, if it's lumpy, sorry, it's not good anymore.
It's toast. What do you do with it then?
Oh, well, then you have to dispose of it.
And we can help with that, actually.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we will recycle. If you've got leftover latex paint that you don't know what to do with, even if it's good, we can take that back.
Especially if it's good.
And take care of that. And if you do have stuff that it has frozen and it's non-salvageable,
we can take care of that,
we can dispose of that as well. We charge $3 per container.
Yes.
And you can get more information just by chatting with us online or calling us in the store. We'll walk you through how that all works. But that is an option if you need it. One other thing to mention before we wrap it all up is that if you're working on a project in the garage, because a lot of us do, especially if it's like a paint stripping project.
Right, in the wintertime.
That's not great.
No, paint strippers don't work very well in cold weather. And so it's best to bring that indoors into a room, maybe your basement, whatever. It'll work way better. Strippers work way more effectively in warm temperatures.
Right, and if you're using a water-based paint stripper like Citrus Strip, you're not going to have any issues with the stink anyway.
Right.
All right. There's a lot of other things. If you do tackle a project in the winter and you just want to make sure you've got everything lined up right so you don't have any mistakes or any issues, or at least as few as possible, just stop out at any RepcoLite or Port City Paint store. Tell us what you're working on and we'll walk you through it.
Yep.
Now, when we come back, we're going to go to an old segment where Betsy and I talked about some woodworking mistakes and how to avoid them. Okay. Not just how to make them, how to avoid them. That's all next. Stay tuned.
If you want to take your DIY skills up a rung, the RepcoLite Home Improvement Show is here to give you a boost on News Radio Wood 1300 and 106.9 FM.
Well, Betsy, let's wrap this up.
Yeah, last segment.
Last segment. Full steam ahead, right?
Yes, exactly.
We're not coasting. We're
Well,
living
of
off
course
the
not.
caffeine that we've been pumping down our gullets.
That's you.
Gullet. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
It is.
I think so. My grandpa used to use it all the
sure
time.
wish I hadn't questioned it. I wish I had just rolled right on.
You would have looked a whole lot smarter if you
It
just
would have,
rolled
but
right
then
on.
it would have probably been the wrong word, and I would have looked
Yes,
really
that
dumb.
has happened to you a number of times.
I use the wrong word all the time. What did I do this right at the beginning of the show?
PTA instead
Yeah, the
of
PSA,
PSA?
the public service announcement. We gave you a PTA. The kids are at home shaking their head. Dad, service starts with S.
You're so embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about some common woodworking mistakes made by beginners and others.
Yeah, I was going to say you're kind of an other, and some of these things
Oh yeah, I've learned a
you
few of
do
these.
them once,
Yep.
and you don't necessarily remember them the second time. I mean, that's for all people, not just you.
Yeah.
I'm not
There's-
beating you down.
No, well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, some of these are mistakes that you make once and you learn. You just
Yeah,
didn't realize
yeah,
this
yeah.
was something. Other ones are things that
Yeah, if
you
you
just
don't
try
do
to
it
take a
often-
shortcut,
Yeah.
and we're always tempted to. It can bite you.
Right.
But anyway, let's talk about these because they are interesting and they can really mess with the project and make it not as much fun as
Right.
it should be. And woodworking should be a ton of fun. It
Yeah.
should actually be relaxing.
Yeah.
I mean, once you get over the initial stress. No, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But the first mistake, and we're drawing from an article kind of that we found on the Family Handyman
Yep.
website. Liked this article. There were a couple things we tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, it's really good, and we'll post a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
First mistake, and this was a big one for me, and it drove me nuts until I figured out what was going on.
Yeah.
The mistake is not accounting for the kerf when you're using a saw
Right.
or any kind of cutting
Now
implement.
you better explain what a kerf
I will.
is.
So here's the idea. You start a project. So you get your 2x4s out, let's say.
Yep.
And you need to cut them into 2-foot sections.
Yeah, you have an 8 foot
Yeah,
length
you've got an
and
8-foot length. You're going to cut 4 2-foot sections out of that. So you throw your tape measure down. You make a mark at 2 foot, at 4 foot, at 6 foot.
Right.
And then at 8 foot, you have a little bit of left over and you're thinking you're perfect. And then you run it through the saw.
Right.
And when you're all done, you've got this problem where none of them are exactly the same size. So you know what I always used to do? Cut them down again. So I'd mark them by the shortest one.
And by the time you were done, your table was like for ants because the legs were
it's
so
like an
short.
Oriental style table. We just sit on the floor.
You just sit on the floor.
You don't
Right.
need chairs for those tables. No, but what's going on is I didn't account for the kerf.
Yeah.
And the kerf is basically the material that a cutting tool removes from the wood.
Yeah,
all right?
it's the sawdust that you make.
The blade width is
Yep.
usually, or if it's a router, it's a wider thing.
Right.
But the big time this happens is with like a table saw or a miter saw,
Right.
and it's the width of the blade, that
Yeah.
1/8 inch, because it just rips through it. And like Betsy said, you're getting sawdust from it. We need to think about that. That sawdust comes from somewhere. It's wood that's removed.
Right.
It's not like a scissors that just shears through paper. You don't have paper
Right.
dust when you're done cutting
Hopefully
stuff.
not.
Usually not. Unless you got that one scissors that we've got at home, the pizza cutting scissors.
Yes.
If you use that on paper, who knows what you've got.
Right.
But anyway, scissors shear the paper.
yeah.
It's not how it works with
That's
a saw.
why sometimes they're called shears.
Right. So you end up with that 1/4 inch gap.
Yeah.
Or that 1/8 inch
1/8
gap.
gap.
And as you go, that can really add up over time. So
yeah,
you need
because
to,
what is an 1/8 inch plus an 1/8 inch? I
it
mean,
just grows and grows. So you've got to account for that. And here's a couple really simple ways to do it. First off, don't measure everything all at once. So
Yeah.
don't throw the tape on the 2x4, make all the marks, and then take it to the saw.
I think that's very common. I think that's what people do.
It is. Because we think that's it's
Right.
time-saving. It seems practical. Right. Instead, make one measurement, make the mark, and then make the cut. Then make a new measurement, make the mark, make the cut. Right. So on. That's the best way to go with that.
Yeah.
The other thing you need to do is when you draw that line, when you scribe that line on the wood, don't go over the line. Err on the side of the excess. That little bit, the extra side. Don't err on the piece that you're trying to save.
Right.
Err
Don't
in the
cut
other direction.
Into your 2 foot, cut on the outside
that
of your
way
2
the
foot.
kerf happens in the excess.
Right.
And you're fine.
Yeah.
If you do it the other way, it ends up shortening the wood.
Yeah.
So there you go. Not accounting for the kerf.
Right.
One thing you can do.
Yep.
Another thing that's a problem is tear out or blowout.
This happens a lot, and you see it a ton, especially on like chop saws and things like that, miter saws, where you go through the piece of wood and you have all those little splintery things that
Right, the fiber
come out.
and how it splits, and you get this really choppy, jagged edge.
Right.
There's basically chipping along the edge.
Yeah.
It can be really bad with plywood, and it's really bad when what you're cutting is a finished piece. That's
then you have to fill, you have to putty,
it can be a real pain in the neck. So there are a couple things to work on to fix this. And the first thing, the first two involve the blades.
Yeah.
Use a sharp blade. Always use a sharp blade, especially if this cut really matters.
Think of your knives at home, how you can't cut through something if your blade is dull.
Pizza scissors.
That as well.
Never use the pizza scissors.
Well, and you can tell
except for pizza.
When scissors are dull, you can tell because the edge of the paper.
You can put them on your finger and it doesn't cut them.
Well, and the paper gets a little bit fluffy along the edge. I mean, it's not a nice sharp edge. You're probably not going to get a paper cut from it. Your blade's the same way.
Yes, except round and there's teeth on it. So make sure you're using a sharp blade. Also, make sure you're using the right blade.
Yeah.
A lot of different surfaces have specific blades that are recommended.
Yeah, teeth per inch or square inch or whatever it is.
Right, there's that, but there's also blades for specific situations. Right. The teeth per inch thing, that's something else to think about. If there's fewer teeth, the saw cuts faster, removes wood quicker, but there's more tendency for this tear out or blowout.
Right.
More teeth is going to give you a finer, slower cut, and that makes perfectly good sense.
Yes.
And just think about it.
Right.
Although I don't know that works, does it? Because if I had fewer teeth in my head, I think that would be a slower chew than if I was like really full of chompers.
But it's not going to be a finer chew. I mean, you're going to have some pretty big pieces to swallow it out.
I better stay away from steak.
Yep.
Anyway, I don't know if that works for saw blades, but the way it is with the blades, the fewer teeth, quicker cut, but a little more rough.
Right.
More teeth, much finer cut, but it is a little slower.
Right.
So those are a couple things. The other trick, and I made use of this, and then I didn't make use of it. I regretted it on that gaming table that I made.
Yep.
Because I made these panels that fit inside like leaves, so that we can actually have a smooth tabletop, not just the TV underneath.
Right.
Like we talked about last week. Anyway, we had like a laminated, Formica type wood that I picked up at the store. It was just inexpensive, and I figured it'll work for now.
Yeah.
And I was so concerned that when I was ripping these down on the table saw that they were going to chip along that Formica edge.
Yeah.
So I taped it.
Yeah.
I ran safe release 3M tape, and then on another one I used frog tape, and I put it on the edge.
Yep.
That's the bottom facing edge.
Right.
So the bottom of the piece, and taped the edges. I taped up the sides to prevent it from tearing out or blowing out as it exited the saw.
Right.
And it was perfect. And then I had to make one adjustment to one of the leaves. And I thought, I'm going to skip that taping step. I don't need it. Yeah, chip the whole thing up. So use the tape. That's a really simple way to go.
I think they use tape on glass as well for that exact same reason. It just keeps it from splintering.
Right. And there you go, Dan. That's it.
You
were just treated to a little old school RepcoLite home improvement show.
Yeah.
Yeah, you stepped into Betsy's stilettos. It's hideous, folks. You don't want to see it. But I appreciate you stepping up.
At least trying to step into the shoes.
Yeah. You mushed your little feet in. Your toes are all pointing out. It was horrible to look at. Anyway, if you want to check this one out again, you can find it online at RepcoLite.com. And while you're there, make sure you check out our online store. You can do a lot of ordering. Place some orders for a product that you want to get, and then arrange for curbside pickup. If you don't want to come into the stores, we can definitely accommodate you and help you get everything you need curbside.
Right.
Contact free.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
All right, whatever you do today, make sure paint's a part of it. RepcoLite and Port City Paint Stores are open until 3 o'clock, waiting to help. I'm Dan Hansen.
And I'm Dan Altina.
Thanks for listening.